Hi, good afternoon. My name is Bea Copen and I'm at the Batasang Pambansa. Just a few minutes ago, members of the majority held a press conference, a conversation really, with media. It's the first in-person na ugnayan between members of the House of Representatives and the media covering the House of Representatives in a long time. Of course, as we all know, we are still under a pandemic, pero yung one of the first times na nag-in-person na briefing yung members of the majority, led of course by House Majority Leader Manix Delipe. He was also joined by Marikina Representative Stella Kimbo, who is also Vice Chairperson of the Appropriations Committee, or the committee that handles the proposed budget for the government, and also newbie legislator PBA Representative Mix Nograles. So, ano ba yung point ng media briefing today? Basically, yung pinaka-focus would be the legislative agenda of the 19th Congress. But to be specific, ano ba yung pinaka-focus ng legislators ngayon? Siyempre yung proposed budget of the Marcos administration, the first budget really of the Marcos administration, because as you would know, the budget they're working on or working with in 2022, bale holdover lang yan or pamana lang yan ng previous Duterte administration. So, Representative Kimbo, who again is Vice Chair of the Appropriations Committee, said that the Congress, or the 19th Congress specifically, is keen on passing an economic recovery budget, her words, that aligns with the Marcos administration's 8-point economic agenda. She also vowed that they would work tirelessly to pass a budget that's responsive to the needs of the people. So just to give you a quick timeline of how the budget or the proposed budget will be going through the 19th Congress and specifically the House of Representatives. August 22, ceremonial turnover yan ng DBM, ng admin, ng executive rather, two members of the House, so literally aabutin yung napakakapal na GAA, two members of the House, and then by August 26, the members or DBM, led by the DBM of course, officials from the executive will be briefing naman House members, and pwede rin naman yung respective committees regarding the proposed budget for 2023, and then by September 30, end of deliberations na yan, mapapasa na ang budget, or yun yung target rather, ng 19th Congress ng House of Reps na maipasa yung budget on their part sa plenary. So, what does that mean? So that would be August 26 to September 30, within a month, yun yung target ng Congress to pass the proposed budget of the Marcos administration. I think, if I'm not mistaken, middle September, gusto nila tapos na yung committees in tackling the budget. So if you're not familiar with how budget deliberations go, after it's submitted by the executive to Congress, so both the House of Reps and the Senate, parang the Appropriations Committee will be divided into subcommittees who will then tackle the budget of the different departments simultaneously. Bakit ganon? Kasi kung isang malaking committee lang, it'll take too long, months even possibly, to tackle the budget. So, also to expedite things, habang nagtatackle siya sa House of Representatives, the Senate will also tackle the budget on their side naman. Subcommittees rin will be tackling that. And then once it passes through the committee level, it's brought before plenary, then it's approved on third reading or it's passed, and then magkakaroon yan ng bicameral committee of the two houses to reconcile any differences between the two chambers in terms of the budget that they approve per agency. And during budget deliberations, the heads of the agencies usually, or representatives of the agency, will face legislators, so senators in the Senate and representatives here in Batasang Pambansa to defend the budget. And oftentimes, it's also the opportunity for legislators to ask questions na sometimes potentially, why wasn't it used efficiently or properly? And we'll talk about efficiency and proper use of the budget in a little bit. So that's the lay of the land in the coming weeks, coming month really, ahead of, as we expect the executive to submit their proposed budget to the legislative. So yung isang emphasis ni Representative Kimbo, who again is an economist and is also the vice chairperson for the Appropriations Committee, she's now a member of the majority. In the previous Congress, in the 18th Congress, she was actually a member of the minority. So siya yung nagka-question, or siya yung nagde-deliberate, or siya yung nag-lead ng deliberations din to the majority then about the proposed budget. So, yung emphasis ni Representative Kimbo is the importance of communication between the legislative and executive branches. You might wonder, bakit ganon? Di ba separate branches yun, co-equal branches. But it's also important for them to be kahit paano on the same page. And that's where councils such as the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council come in. And it's during those meetings na one, like the executive lays out, na-lay out na siya ni President Marcos during the SONA, but that's when other managers will lay out, ito yung priorities natin, ito yung gusto natin, and then legislators can also give their 2 cents. The idea is to avoid stalling the passage of priority legislation or ultimately to avoid the vetoing of bills. Na-emphasize na rin to na President Marcos vetoed, I think, as of a week or 2 ago, 4 bills that were passed under the previous Congress, previous administration. So we want to avoid that, or legislators want to avoid that because as they pointed out, sayang nga naman sa oras. Sayang yung oras na nilaan ng legislators in deliberating, scrutinizing, reconciling, and then eventually passing a bill only to find out that the executive has concerns over it and eventually it's vetoed. So sayang naman yun. So that's one thing. And then as Representative Kimbo also pointed out, 8 of the 19 legislative priorities of President Marcos actually passed the 18th Congress on third reading. So pumasa na siya sa plenary, hindi nga lang siya naging batas siguro kasi may issues or tapos na yung mga term at may mga bagong legislators who joined that. But also similar to the 18th, what the 18th and the 19th Congress have in common, and actually previous Congresses before that, is that it is dominated by a supermajority that is allied with the current administration. And we'll talk about the supermajority a little more in a little bit. So yung gusto daw ng leadership ng majority under the 19th Congress is not just effective but cost-effective legislation. Again, we're going back to ayaw natin ng vetoes or ayaw nila ng vetoes para hindi masayang yung time ng legislators and so that the executive is also satisfied with the provisions of any proposed law or any bill that passes Congress. So yun. Another thing that was also briefly discussed earlier, although I think my colleague Dwight De Leon would have more details about this, is yung proposed postponement ng SKIT barangay elections. I believe it passed first reading dito sa Kamara. Sabay siya actually while the press conference was ongoing. Nagkakahearing dun sa suffrage committee. The House seems keen on actually approving this eventually. If you recall, President Marcos himself has been pushing for the postponement of barangay elections. Si Representative Kimbo herself is supportive of postponing the barangay elections because citing daw yung fiscal space natin, she also emphasized na we might want to use those funds instead of for the barangay elections to fund something like the return to face-to-face classes, which of course is also a priority of the current administration. And that's headed by Vice President Sara Duterte, who's also the Education Secretary of the Philippines. So, we talked about priority legislation, passing the legislative agenda of the 19th Congress. Yung important context dito, again, like I said, a supermajority dominates the 19th Congress. And when I say that, I mean it dominates both the House and the Senate. So in the Senate, you have a supermajority of 20 senators, 20 out of 24, who are allied explicitly with the Marcos administration. You have 2 members lang of the minority, and then you have 2, the Cayetano siblings, who are both senators, are in the independent bloc of the Senate. Dito naman sa House, if I'm not mistaken, the House has around 311 members. Of the 311, around 20 or 30 are part of the minority, so that means more than close to 300 are part of the supermajority. Jodes and I spoke about this in an episode of Beyond the Stories. Hindi naman ibig sabihin ito automatically na kumbaga marirailroad ng Congress or dire-diretsyong papasa ng Congress, lahat ng priority legislation ng Pangulo or ng, yung pinagkasunduan nila na priority legislation. But it does give you a huge advantage kasi the House leadership obviously is not only on your side. Well, the House leadership is usually almost always on the side of the President, but majority of the House members have explicitly said that they are allied with or that they will cooperate with the administration. And briefly lang, Majority Leader Dalipe talked about yung composition ng leadership ng Senate at ng House. If you're not yet familiar, the House Speaker is Representative Martin Romualdez, who is the first cousin of the President, and the Senate President is Senator Miguel Zubiri, who was a senatorial candidate under the Uniteam slate. So yung sinabi ni Majority Leader Dalipe kanina, parang he finds it good that the two men are leading both chambers of Congress. Kasi malaki daw yung pinagsamahan nila during the 2022 campaign. But again, I discussed this with Jodes during Beyond the Stories episode na yes, they are very good allies and there's little doubt that they would do their best to deliver for the President and to deliver in terms of, the priority legislation, the key laws that the executive might want to pass. Pero yung tanong natin dito, how effective they will be as leaders of the two chambers. Kasi like the Senate, for example, parang nagiging corny na siya, pero 24 republics yun. So may sarili-sariling agenda, may sarili-sariling gusto, may sarili-sariling priorities. How will Senate President Zubiri ensure that the 24 or at least the 20 republics that are on his side will vote according to leadership decisions? And the same applies with House Speaker Martin Romualdez. So that's the latest so far dito sa Batasang Pambansa. We will be giving you updates soon as the executive submits the proposed budget to the legislative, and for sure until the end of September, assuming they meet their self-imposed deadline, we will be giving you more updates on Rappler, hindi lang sa budget, kung magkano yung budget na propose ng Marcos administration, but definitely how legislators will scrutinize at sana naman hindi or will fail to scrutinize, for instance, the proposed budget for the Philippines in 2023. Again, this has been Bea Cupin. I'm at Nabatasang Pambansa, and you are watching Rappler. Tune in for more updates, not just on the Marcos administration, and definitely also the legislative branch of government. Thank you, guys. Bye.